Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'd been with this cleaning company for about 6 months when everything happened. The job wasn't bad. I cleaned government buildings, mostly vacuuming floors and doing basic maintenance. But there was one problem. My manager. She had a reputation. I'd heard the complaints from other cleaners during our brief overlaps in the break room. She played favorites. She changed the rules on a whim, and she had this twisted way of punishing people she didn't like. I'd managed to fly under her radar for the most part, keeping my head down and doing my job. But I guess my luck ran out. It started like any normal Tuesday. I clocked in, grabbed my supplies from the storage closet, and headed to my assigned floors. I was doing my usual routine when my manager found me on the 4th floor. She told me she needed me to do some extra floors that day, just vacuuming work. I said sure, no problem, and explained that I didn't have that many floors on my regular list anyway. I asked her to just give me a list of which ones needed doing and I could knock them out after finishing my regular assignment. She agreed without any argument and said she'd have the list ready for me later. Then she walked away and I went back to work. Nothing seemed unusual about the exchange. Extra work came up all the time, someone called in sick, a special event needed prep, whatever. I'd done plenty of extra floors before without any issues. I finished my regular floors in about 2 hours. Not bad time actually. I felt pretty good about it when I headed to the office to get that list of extra floors. But when I walked in, my manager looked up at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. I greeted her and said I was done with my floors and ready for that list of extra ones she needed vacuumed. She looked confused and asked what I meant. She said she'd needed those extra floors done early in the morning and had already sent someone else to do them because I hadn't waited around. I was confused. I told her she'd never mentioned they were time sensitive. She'd just said she needed extra floors done and would give me a list after I finished my regular work. If she'd told me it was urgent, I obviously would have waited. She rolled her eyes at me like I was a child who wasn't getting it. She repeated that she'd needed them done early, and that I should have waited. But whatever, she added dismissively, what's done is done. I took a deep breath. I wasn't going to argue in circles with her. I asked if there was anything else that needed to be done then. She smiled, not a friendly smile, the kind of smile that meant trouble. She told me to go grab a bucket, some gloves, and some magic erasers from the supply closet. She needed me to scrub the walls of the parking garage. When I asked about the parking garage, she clarified that she meant all 5 levels, and it should be done by the end of my shift. My stomach dropped. The parking garage. Everyone knew what that meant. It was her go-to punishment job. Dirty, tedious work that wasn't even part of our contract with the building. She'd send people there when she decided they'd stepped out of line, and she expected all 5 levels done in the remaining hours of my shift. That was impossible and she knew it. But what choice did I have? I grabbed the supplies and headed down to the garage. The walls were covered in grime, exhaust residue, and God knows what else. I started on the 1st level, scrubbing section by section. My arms ached. The fumes from the cleaning solution mixed with car exhaust made my head pound. I kept checking my phone, watching the hours tick by. By the time my shift was ending, I'd barely finished 1 level. I found my manager and my supervisor together near the main office. I approached them and let them both know that I finished 1 level of the parking garage and would try to get more done tomorrow. My supervisor's head snapped up. He asked why I'd been in the parking garage at all, confusion clear in his voice. I explained that she had asked me to scrub the walls down there, all 5 levels of them. I watched his face turn red. He told everyone in the office area to get out immediately. The few people nearby scattered quickly. I started to leave too, but he told me to stay put. What followed was the loudest argument I'd ever heard in a workplace. My supervisor was absolutely furious. He demanded to know why she'd sent me down there. He said they'd been looking for me for hours because I was needed for the 3rd floor restrooms since the afternoon guy had called in sick. She tried to defend herself by saying I needed something to do after I messed up the morning floors. He shot back that I hadn't messed up anything, that she'd given me unclear instructions, Then he really laid into her, pointing out that the parking garage wasn't even part of our contract with the building. We weren't supposed to be cleaning that at all. He reminded her that she'd been warned before about pulling this kind of thing on employees. She weakly tried to excuse herself by claiming she was just trying to keep me busy. He wasn't having it. He said busy wasn't the issue. She'd wasted company time and money because of some petty power trip. He explained that I couldn't be reached down in the garage because there was no radio signal and the cell service was terrible. We had actual contracted work that needed doing, and no one could find me to assign it. It went on like that for a while. I just stood there awkwardly, not sure if I should leave or stay. Eventually, my supervisor told me to go home and assured me I'd get paid for my full shift. The next day, I clocked in expecting more drama. Instead, I found my manager waiting for me with the regional manager and my supervisor standing behind her. She looked like she'd been forced to swallow something bitter. She spoke stiffly, saying she wanted to apologize for the day before. Her instructions had been clear and she shouldn't have sent me to work on something outside our contract. She was sorry for the inconvenience. Everyone looked at me, waiting for my response. I kept my voice calm and professional. I thanked her for the apology but pointed out that it wasn't my time and money that got wasted. It was the company's. Then I said that if there was nothing else, I needed to get to my floors because I had a busy day of vacuuming ahead of me. I walked away without waiting for a response. This story happened about 13 years ago when I was working at a shop in a big city. The shop had a pretty standard setup for the motorcycles industry. There were 8 of us technicians split between 2 shifts. My shift worked 4 days, got 2 off, then worked 6 more before another 2-day break. The other shift had the opposite schedule. We had a service department manager who ran the floor, and the shop owner was usually off doing other things, not in the building much. I'd been working at this place for a few years by then. The pay was decent, the work was steady, and I knew my way around pretty much any bike that rolled through those doors. Harley-Davidson models were our bread and butter, and I could tear one down and rebuild it with my eyes closed. The service manager, though, he was a different story. He had this attitude like he was always right, always knew better than everyone else, and didn't like being questioned about anything. Most of us just learned to nod and do what he said to avoid the headache. So I came in one day after my 2 days off, ready to get back to work. I walked over to my lift bench and immediately noticed something odd. There was a brand new Harley-Davidson Dyna sitting there, already partially taken apart. At the end of my bench was a brand new Jim's Performance engine still in its box on the floor. One of the guys from the other shift had started this job and left it for whoever came in next, which happened to be me. Now Dynas back then came in different models and also had 2 different powertrain finishes. You had your silver and chrome bikes and your black and chrome bikes. We used to call the silver ones blonde and the black ones brunettes around the shop. The engine, transmission, and primary covers all matched whatever color scheme the bike had. I took one look at the bike and one look at the engine sitting in that box, and I immediately saw the problem. The motorcycle sitting on my bench was blonde, all silver and chrome. The engine in the box was brunette, completely black. They didn't match at all. This was during our slower season. Winter up north meant fewer people riding, which meant fewer bikes coming in for service. The shop owner liked to use these quiet times to work on his own projects, bikes he'd customize and then either keep or sell for a profit. This was one of those projects, a good job to keep us busy when customer bikes weren't piling up. Before my shift officially started, I went to find the service manager. I needed to confirm what I was supposed to be doing. I asked him if the Dyna on my bench was my job for today. He confirmed that it was and told me to finish the engine swap that had already been started. I tried to explain that I wanted to check something because I'd noticed an issue, but he cut me off immediately. He snapped at me to quit asking questions and just do what he told me to do. He cut me off before I could even point out the obvious problem. I stood there for a second considering my options. I knew I wasn't going to get fired. I'd been there long enough and was good enough at my job that losing me would hurt them more than it would hurt me. And honestly, I was tired of this guy's attitude. So I made a decision right then and there. If he wanted me to stop asking questions and just do what he said, that's exactly what I was going to do. I went back to my bench and got to work. I figured someone would notice and stop me before I got too far into it. Surely someone would realize what was happening and clue the service manager in. I even dragged my feet a little, working slower than normal, giving people plenty of opportunities to catch the mistake. Pulling an engine out of a 96 cubic inch dyna isn't a quick job, and it takes time, precision, and a lot of steps. The stock engine came out without any issues. I kept expecting the service manager to come over and check on the progress, but he never showed up. So I kept going. By the end of the day, I was almost done installing the black engine into the bike. There it sat, this brand new motorcycle worth over $20,000, with a $5,000 performance engine that was completely the wrong color. The black engine looked ridiculous, sitting next to the silver transmission case and silver primary cover. The whole thing looked cheap and junky, like someone had slapped together mismatched parts without any thought. That's when the shop owner decided to pay a visit to the service department. He walked in and immediately spotted me working on his new bike. I watched him approach with a smile on his face, probably excited to see his project coming together. Then I watched that smile completely disappear when he got about 8 feet away and realized what he was looking at. I should mention that I have what people call resting angry face. When I'm focused and in my own head, I tend to look pretty serious, almost like I'm scowling. It's just how my face sits. I wasn't doing it on purpose, but I also wasn't trying to hide it. Inside though, I was smirking. This was about to get interesting. The owner came over and asked me what I was doing. I told him I was putting the gym's engine into his bike. He asked me why I would do that, getting angrier when he spoke. He asked if I couldn't see that the engine was black while the rest of the bike was silver. I confirmed that yes, I could definitely see that. He demanded to know why I would install a mismatched engine if I knew it was the wrong color. I explained that when I tried to mention the problem to the service manager earlier, he told me to stop asking questions and just do what I was told. The owner's face went through about 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. He pressed his lips together tight and just walked away from me without another word. I knew where he was going. I kept working on the job since no one had officially told me to stop. I was about 90% done when the service manager showed up about 10 minutes later. All that bluster and attitude from earlier in the day was completely gone. He nervously told me to go ahead and take the engine back out of the bike and put it back in the box. No apology, no explanation, just instructions to undo everything I'd just spent an entire day doing. Since it was near the end of my shift, removing the engine took up most of the next day. Turns out the bike really did belong to the shop owner, and he'd ordered a different engine for it, a silver one that would actually match. The black engine was meant for a completely different project. I just wasted 2 full days of work with absolutely zero progress to show for it. The shop lost money because they had to pay my wages, but had nothing to bill out for my time. Pure waste. I don't know if the service manager actually learned anything from that experience. Not long after, the whole housing bubble collapse hit our country and the shop's morale tanked overnight. Nothing actually changed at the shop itself, but when the owner announced there wouldn't be any raises or bonuses for a year, people started leaving in droves. At the peak of it, we lost 7 staff members in a single day. Some people switched industries entirely and ended up making less money. Some went off to chase passion projects. And some, like me, ended up finding better opportunities with more money and better benefits. The shop eventually got sold, and I don't think I know anyone who still works there anymore. By the time I hit 30, I was doing okay for myself. I had a good job, a small apartment, and a solid group of friends. I wasn't really looking for anything serious relationship-wise, but I wasn't opposed to it either. That's when I met my husband at a friend's cousin's party. It was one of those summer barbecues where you don't really know half the people there. I was standing by the drinks table when he walked up and made some joke about the potato salad. We started talking and just clicked. He was funny, kind, and we had this easy conversation that lasted the entire night. We exchanged numbers, and within a week we were dating. Things moved naturally between us. We fell in love, moved in together after a year, and got married 4 years later. Everything felt right. Then, about 6 months ago, I found out I was pregnant. We were over the moon. 4 months ago, we welcomed our son into the world, and life felt complete. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The real story starts when I first met his mother. It was at his uncle's funeral, about a year into our relationship. My husband asked me to come with him for support, and I said yes without hesitation. Before we left, his cousin pulled me aside and warned me about their mom. He told me she wasn't the nicest person and that she had impossibly high standards to meet. He said she could be really judgmental and that I shouldn't take anything personally because she treated everyone that way. I asked my husband about it on the drive there. He admitted that his mother could be quite judgmental, but told me not to worry because he'd be there with me the whole time. I thought they were giving me the sugar-coated version to keep me calm. Turns out they were. She was worse than I imagined. The moment we arrived, she spotted me and immediately confronted my husband. She demanded to know who I was and why he'd brought a stranger to a family funeral. My husband explained that I was his girlfriend and that his aunt, the widow, had said he could bring me. His mother insisted it was inappropriate and that the funeral was family only. He repeated that his aunt was okay with it, so it was fine. She didn't let it go. For the rest of the day, she shot me these nasty looks and made passive-aggressive comments under her breath. Every time I walked past her, she'd whisper something to whoever was standing nearby. It was humiliating. Then came our wedding. She made a whole scene there too, but that's another story entirely. After that, my husband and I agreed to keep contact with her to a minimum. We'd see her at major holidays, and that was it. Life was peaceful. Then I got pregnant. My husband eventually told her the news. I braced myself for an explosion, but instead, she surprised us both. She was thrilled about becoming a grandmother. She congratulated us over and over. She called us every week to check in on how I was feeling, if we'd picked out names, if we needed anything. It was bizarre, but I thought maybe the idea of being a grandmother had softened her. Maybe she'd changed. I grudgingly let her visit a few times. When it came time for me to give birth, she called my husband and said she wanted to be there when her grandson was born. She wanted to see him come into the world. I told my husband absolutely not, and that this was a private moment. She argued that she was a grandmother, but I stood firm and said I didn't care, and that she wasn't going to be in that delivery room. She showed up at the hospital anyway. She tried to force her way into the room, screaming about her rights as a grandmother. Security had to remove her. I was mortified. After we brought our son home, I refused to let her visit. My husband agreed it was for the best, but then she called him crying. She apologized and said she'd just been so overwhelmed about becoming a grandmother and that her emotions had gotten the better of her. She begged to meet him and promised she'd behave. Against my better judgment, I said, okay. When she first held him, she looked at me and said he was beautiful. I felt a small sense of relief. I went into the kitchen to get us some drinks. That's when I heard my husband's voice, loud and angry. He was telling her to get out and to leave right now. I rushed back into the living room and asked what was going on. She started yelling that he needed to get the baby tested because he didn't look like anyone in their family. My husband ordered her to leave immediately. She protested and said she was just saying what everyone was thinking. He shouted at her to get out of his house. She left, but that wasn't it. She went on social media and posted about how I'd cheated on my husband. She wrote this long post about how he needed to get a DNA test to prove he was the father. She tagged half the family. The post blew up. People were commenting, sharing it, messaging us. I was furious. So I made my own post saying I'd get a DNA test for my son when she got one for hers. I hit post before I could second guess myself. The fallout was immediate. She called my husband, screaming at him to tell me to take that post down right now. He hung up on her, but the damage was done. Now everyone was questioning my husband's paternity. People were sending him messages asking if he was really his mother's son. Some family members stopped talking to us entirely. Others thought it was hilarious. My husband sat me down a few days later and asked if I thought maybe I'd gone too far. I asked him what he meant. He said people were asking him if he was really his mom's son and that this was getting out of hand. I asked him what he expected me to do after she accused me of cheating and said our son wasn't his. He said he didn't know, but maybe I shouldn't have made it worse. I told him she'd made it public first, and that if she didn't want people questioning her, she shouldn't have questioned me. Then he asked if we should just get the test done to put this to rest. I stared at him. He said he was just suggesting it might help. I told him if he wanted a paternity test, we could do that, but when it came back proving the baby was his, he could also start paying child support because I wasn't staying married to someone who didn't trust me. He went quiet. 2 days later, he made a post of his own saying that anyone who questioned whether his son was his would not be welcome in their home. He wrote that his mother's accusations were disgraceful and irrational, and that this ended now. His mother called, sobbing, but he didn't answer. She hasn't tried to contact us since. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.